Hey gang, StatKing back again with another episode of AEW Dark Powerrr and NWA Powerrr. We actually don't have an episode of NWA Powerrr this week, as we discussed last week, and as you watched with NWA Powerrr, they're doing a new show this week called Circle Squared. Circle Squared is going to be kind of a form of TNA's boot camp gut check, where people who are fighting for a contract have matches, and we get to vote and decide on whether or not they receive a contract with the NWA. So starting first with AEW Dark, we have 4 matches this week. We have Kris Statlander versus Diamante, the Hybrid 2 versus Best Friends, Chrissy James versus Big Swole, and QT Marshall and Peter Avalon versus the Young Bucks. So they start off with Statlander and Diamante, and it's a quick match, as will be the Chrissy James and Big Swole match, and it's an interesting kind of match in the sense that, or at least the 2 women's matches, in that Diamante is a great seller, and so she's going out of her way to make Statlander look really strong, really good in the ring. Statlander is going to benefit from this, and if you notice who wins this match and who wins the Chrissy James and Big Swole match, and then you think that this was on a Tuesday, Wednesday on AEW Dynamite, we have Nyla Rose being confronted by 2 women after she says that she breaks bitches. It kind of makes sense as to where they're going with this, right? So they're utilizing the platform of Dark responsibly and smart, to quote Joe Budden from the Joe Budden podcast. But in this matchup, Statlander is going to pull out the win, and she looks great for it. It's a short match, but it gets the job done of what they're trying to do. Moving onwards, we have TH2 versus the Best Friends. The Best Friends are going to pick up this win here. It's a solid match. The Hybrid 2 are a very underrated tag team. I'm hoping they can get more involved. I'm hoping they can get more storylines and things on TV. Right now, they seem to be kind of on the lower tier of tag teams, and I'd like to see them kind of move up, simply because when I started watching this, granted, oftentimes we know what happened with Dark, with the spoilers and things like that, but when you're watching, I'm not thinking, hey, the Hybrid 2 are strong contenders to win. I'm thinking more along the lines of, how are Hybrid 2 going to make Best Friends look good? And they do make them look good in the loss, but I would like to see Hybrid 2 kind of take that next step. One thing that I will say is that it seems as though the crowds are more into the concept of Orange Cassidy necessarily than the Best Friends themselves. But what AEW is doing is smart by having the crowds who are interested in Orange Cassidy see Orange Cassidy through Best Friends matches. And so because of that, Best Friends are starting to pick up that steam with the crowd, and they get more awareness because people are interested in seeing whatever Orange Cassidy is going to do. Speaking of which, he does have a fun little spot in this match where he, I think it's Evans, is on the rope, is on the turnbuckle, and Cassidy's on the ring apron, and he's just tapping away at his hands so that he can stop him from jumping off. And then Angelico in the ring bounces off the ropes, comes running towards Cassidy, who just turns to the crowd, and both men fall and crotch themselves. Great spot, absolutely hilarious for what it was supposed to do and what it was supposed to achieve. Moving onwards, we have the Chrissy James versus Big Swole. We kind of know where this is going as well. Chrissy James is making her AEW debut. I will say she also does a great job of selling the same way that Diamante did. One thing I do want to add is that I like that they have Trons for them, and Trons may be a kind of a WWE word or terminology, but they have visuals for them, they have music for them, and it's a way to get these people introduced to the crowd. I don't know whether or not Chrissy James has a contract with AEW. I don't know whether this is a one-off. However, I do know that when WWE does jobbers, they have them just in the ring. There's really no entrance for them. They may have some kind of quick little interview or something like that. But in AEW, they are giving them videos or visuals, they're giving them music, they're giving them an entrance. They want you to feel as though when Big Swole beats this person, or when Statlander beats this person, that there is something, it is an accomplishment. It is not just, this is some run-of-the-mill person, a local yokel, if you watch Xavier Woods and Tyler Breeze's Battle of the Brands. It's not just a local yokel, but it is somebody, right? And Chrissy James is from Brazil, so there's really no way that she's a local. They're a local yokel, since we're in America. After this, we have QT Marshall and Peter Avalon putting on their best attempts to possibly beat the Young Bucks in the main event of AEW Dark. I think we all know how this match is going to end. The Bucks are not losing to QT Marshall and Peter Avalon, and they pick up the win. It's a good match for what it's supposed to do, and when you think about when you then think the next day, the Tag Team Battle Royale, who's going to win that match, you can see how Dark is positioning. Dark, even though they're taping the matches a week in advance, they know where they're going the next week. They know what the plan is, so they're setting things up the night before with matches that are actually taped the week prior for what's going to happen the next day on Dynamite. And that's smart. That's cohesion. That's long-term planning that you then map out week by week. Okay, this is the next step. This is the next step. How do we move forward? How do we keep the process going? And that's really smart on their part when it comes to Dark. I'm interested to see how, when Dark becomes an actual TV show down the road on TNT, how that's going to change, what aspects are going to shift, what's going to stay the same, whether it's going to be just kind of matches that we know are not as important but have value in building the stars of tomorrow today. So moving to the NWA episode for this week, it was not an episode of Power, as I've said earlier in the beginning of the show, but NWA Power will be back next week. But this week we have Circle Squared. And Circle Squared is kind of like a reality competition of sorts, where teams or individuals will put their best foot forward in trying to win an NWA contract. And today we have PJ and Luke Hawx, a father and son team, versus Jeff Neal and Tyson Dean, who are being coached by none other than Nikita Koloff. This is kind of cool. I like it. It's an interesting concept. I like the fact that Koloff is involved, at least when it came to this team. But one thing I do like is how, with Circle Squared, they have influencers, wrestling reviewers, wrestling podcasters, wrestling with people from like Wrestling with Regret and different shows and things like that, who are giving their take as it's happening, right? This is, it's not as it's happening, it's taped. They probably sent the clips to those people. Those people recorded their reactions. NWA, you should have called True Heels right here in Chicago. But they are able to opine on what they're seeing, and it adds a nice element to it. It adds that sense of American Idol, The Voice, reality competition. It adds more to it than it would be if these teams are just in the ring having a match. They help to get you interested in them. When people are talking about Luke Hawx's background and his career, you may not know who he is, or you may not know a lot about him. I honestly didn't know that much. But when you hear other people talking about him and talking about what they remember or of him, you go, wow, okay, maybe that's something to look for. That's something to watch. And it builds on what he's going to do in the ring with having those added elements to the program. So I think that's a really great touch. I hope that they continue with that. I don't know when the next episode of Circle Squared is going to be. I think it's actually kind of interesting. They can use Circle Squared as a means to prolong TV tapings. So if now what they do is maybe either every other week or every 2 weeks there's an episode of Circle Squared, you're stretching out how many weeks of TV tapings will cover. And that, I think, is kind of cool, because that allows you to have a longer space of time between pay-per-views if you need to, if you choose to, if you desire. You're able to tell a story over a longer period of time. If you're working more with Ring of Honor, maybe you lean on Ring of Honor events. Maybe you are able to, maybe that time is going to be used to have more tapings, and you're able to build upon what you're attempting to do with the stories. I think that'll be kind of interesting. So I'll be interested to see how they continue with Circle Squared in the future. But as to the match, it's a pretty straightforward tag team match. You have a father and son team versus a kind of overall big man, strong man team, because PJ Hawks is much smaller, he's much younger, and they do well. They do very well for themselves. I think PJ and Luke Hawks definitely, I can't say deserved, because we know that these are predetermined results in the sense of, I guess we're keeping kayfabe, they did deserve to win because they did win. But I think they are the ones who kind of deserve a contract. I generally err on the side of youth, and PJ Hawks is by far the youngest out of the people in the ring. And I like the father-son aspect of it. That adds richness to the storytelling. That adds a dynamic that we don't often see in wrestling. You see a tag team of best friends. Case in point, AEW. You see a tag team of brothers. Case in point, the Rhodes brothers. You see a tag team of people who we thought were brothers, but then find out that they were just childhood friends, Edge and Christian. We see people who are storyline brothers, the Brothers of Destruction or the Dudley Boys, or again, real life brothers in the form of the Hardys. I just named all the people in the TLC match. But we have those kinds of storylines and those kinds of teams, but very rarely do we see father-son teams. And I think that's kind of a nice change. It's a nice twist on the old tale, because we're always looking for something new in professional wrestling, how to tell the same story slightly differently so that it's fresher to the eyes. So I'm looking forward to see what happens with PJ and Luke Hawks. I kind of hope that they come back, that they get a contract, even if it's not a long-term thing or they become part of the roster. I hope to see what they do with themselves on NWA Powerrr going forward and on Circle Squared. So until next time, guys, that'll be all for us today. I'll see you guys next week with a review of AEW Dark and NWA Powerrr. I'll catch you guys then.